again to another episode of The Right Stuff through TV Toastmasters. I'm Ken Coomes, the host, and we're going to talk to Chris Patchell this time. Chris is the award-winning USA Today best-selling author of 6 novels so far. A former tech worker turned author, Chris writes suspense novels set in the Pacific Northwest. Her novels have been praised by New York Times best-selling author Kevin O'Brien and #1 Amazon best-selling author Robert Dugoni. Her rich, complex plot lines and well-drawn characters will keep you turning pages well into the night. Not only is that appropriate for suspense novels and thrillers, but her conversation is scintillating as well, and she'll keep you glued to this episode to the very end, I promise. Chris, I'm glad you could make it tonight. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure being here, remotely from my home office.
It is remote. Of course, these are the times we live in, and I really appreciate you making the time for it, even though you didn't have to commute. You had to set aside the opportunity for this. So we've talked about all the books you've written so far, the praise you've gotten. We haven't even touched on the awards you've won yet. So before we get there, I thought we'd go down a path since our viewers are interested in the right stuff. Every time I speak, viewing audiences want to know, or live audiences also want to know, typically 3 things. They want to know, where do I get my ideas? How much rewriting do I go through? And which path to publication do I recommend and why? So for you, a successful author that changed career paths from tech to writing, let's start with the first one, if you don't mind, and ask you, where do you get your ideas? I'm sure that it's imagination. Surely you're not a victim or a serial killer or anything like that.
They say write what you know, and I promise I have never actually killed anybody except on paper, which turns out to be really cathartic. So story ideas come from a number of places. Sometimes it's just an image in my head. So for my first book, Deadly Lies, I had signed up to take a writing course through the University of Washington. Being type A, I didn't just sit down and start scribbling on my laptop. I had to take a course because, hey, you know. So I started to think about what kind of story I wanted to write, and I got this image in my head of this woman on her husband's computer, and she sees something that she shouldn't have seen, and then once she's seen it, she can't look away. And so then I started to think about, why is it always the woman who finds something on her husband's machine, and why is it always like the man who has a secret life? And so I tipped that story idea on its head, and I made the woman who has a secret life, and then I made her husband a cop, which had all kinds of fun, interesting kind of conflict. So that was the first story. The second story, In the Dark, was more about, the idea came to me because, as I was on social media, I'm looking at people checking in here, checking in there, right? The stuff that they post. And being in tech, I couldn't help but think about all of the little parts of our lives that we put out there, and how if the wrong person were to see that, what they could infer, right? And how easily they could find us and all that kind of thing. So that ended up being the story idea around the second book. And then, a couple months back, I'm sitting in the most boring meeting known to man, and I'm flipping through news stories on my laptop. And I happened to see this story that was about $1 million homes that have secret rooms. And then I thought about this chapter I'd written on my laptop when we were on a road trip back east. And so we're in the middle of nowhere, Montana, and I was thinking about what it would be like to be a waitress in a truck stop, right, and the kind of people you would see. So I had this chapter kind of written and stored away, not knowing what I was going to do with it. And then my husband that morning had sent me a great chilly opening line for a story. And all of these ideas kind of coalesced into this thing. It was oh, that's a really good idea. I can't wait to get home to write that down, right? So that's kind of where my story ideas come from. A little bit of, current stuff that happens in the news. And I always have that kind of tech bent in the back of my head because technology is such a bright field for all of this. And then I usually spend a week or so thinking about the story idea and kind of filling it out, seeing whether it's robust enough to be able to handle a whole arc, a whole, deep, complex story arc. And so it's a little bit of the magic that happens along the way. You get that inspiration thing, and then suddenly you're off to the races on a new story.
And it's a blend of that real life and what you see or hear or read in the news.
Right.
People inspire you or give you an opening line like your husband did.
Yeah.
And then you put these elements together, and as you say, that's how it goes.
Yeah, and then you start thinking about what kind of people are in this story, right? And what would make somebody do some of the things that they do. That's always a fun part of the idea process is, figuring out the people behind it, because people are really the most fascinating puzzles to solve.
As a reader, I really appreciate more the character-driven story. And I get wrapped up in the characters, then I don't want to stop reading. And it's more about them, but it's also about the story arc, as you said, and what happens to them and what they do, why they do it, and what they choose. So appreciate you sharing all those excellent ideas of where your ideas come from and experiences. Now, taking this idea, as you talked about that one, and writing it on the weekend, let's say, and deciding it's big enough to go its own way, how often or how much do you rewrite once you've got something that will go all the way to whatever you want it to be? You can write it the first time. That's probably not enough.
I wish it was. Oh my gosh. I so love the first draft because it's all that creative energy, and it kind of flows out of you onto the page. And it's this, really fun experience. But editing is super crucial too. And I probably go through 4 major editing cycles before I'm ready to call it good enough. And I'll say good enough because the perfectionist in me is never quite happy with it. But, the first draft is about getting all the big boulders in the right places and kind of hashing out that story ideas and getting a sense of character. And then there's a layer of rocks that go on top of that, right? To kind of, what are each of these chapters and what are those chapters about? And are those ideas in the right place? And you might take one of those rocks and throw it out and put something else there. And then you get to the pebble layer where you're like, okay, I'm happy with like the general story arc and the way that the characters are progressing, but there are ways in which I can tune each of those chapters to make them bigger, right? Whether it's a better reveal, whether it's putting more depth to the emotion in those chapters, or ratcheting up the tension and suspense, which is what I love to do. So then that's the kind of that third layer, and then eventually it's about sand, right? And it's about once my chapters are all in place and I'm happy with them, right, going through and doing the edit to make sure the voice is right and kind of tuning the dialogue and making it a little smoother and pulling out all those extra words I like to put in there that don't really need to be in there.
That's a very good analogy. It reminds me of Stephen Covey. He talked about priorities, and if you put in the large things first, then you've got more room to put in the other things to make things fit. And I couldn't help thinking when you were talking about the sand level about how that's where the grit is.
Yeah, right.
So,
by the time I get there, I'm usually like so done with the story idea. I have like this major meltdown where I say to my husband, I just want to burn the manuscript in the backyard and kill myself. Not necessarily in that order. And he laughs and goes, then you're there. He says, you're almost done, right? Because this is your milestone. When you're almost done, you tell me this. And I go, I'm predictable.
So we talked about the rewriting process. We talked about the ideas. As a winner of several awards, including some indie awards, I'm sort of guessing that maybe you went the indie publishing route, or maybe you went self-publishing. Maybe you thought about the others paths. So what do you want to say to viewers and would-be authors about the best way, or the best way for different people to seek publication?
I've done a little bit of several different things, which is kind of fun, right? Like, when I first wrote Deadly Lies, I had this idea of shopping it out to agents and seeing what would happen. But as you can imagine, that story ended up being pretty unconventional. It has a pretty edgy female anti-hero, which at the time I finished editing it, wasn't in the kind of media mainstream yet. I think it's actually more common today to see women who aren't all sugar and spice and everything nice. But back then, agents said, it's an intriguing story, but your main character isn't as likable as we would like her to be. And it's kind of like, no, but I think she's fascinating in that same kind of way that Dexter is, or that Hannibal Lecter is, right? Intelligent, forethought, a little bit charming, because, most sociopaths are a little bit charming, but maybe not so nice. So I sat on that story for a while, and I went on to write other things. And it sat on my hard drive, like collecting cyber dust for a couple years. And every once in a while, when my friends would write me and send me an article that says, hey, have you seen this? This person is really doing great in self-publishing. You should consider that. And I'd go, yeah, maybe, whatever, right? And I'd file it. And slowly but surely over that 2 years, my husband worked on me. And then my best friend, my husband, ganged up on me one night. We were out to dinner. And over a river of martinis, they convinced me that I was going to self-publish this book. And so I thought, okay, I can do that. But I, being type A again, I needed to come up with what my goals were in self-publishing. If I'm going to self-publish this, what do I want to accomplish? And so the first thing I wanted to accomplish was seeing whether my work had an audience. Because, my hero was a little bit unconventional, and I'd taken some risks with that novel, and so I was curious how people would react to that. The second thing I wanted to accomplish was to learn more about the publishing process. And let me tell you, when you self-publish, you learn a lot about the process because you're doing everything yourself. And so then it became a journey about learning, which, has been great. I've enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot along the way. So both of those goals were fulfilled with my first book. My second one, I don't know if you remember seeing anything about the Kindle Scout contest. So it was kind of like crowdsourcing from Amazon.
I didn't know anything about it at the time, but I noticed that you are Kindle Scout winner.
Yeah, right. So I entered my second book. I was working with a marketing gal at the time, and she said, how's your second book coming along? I'm like, it's almost done. But I sit in that almost done phase for quite a while, right? Because I'm like in the pebbles and the rocks for too long, because that's how we roll. So she said, what are you going to do with it? And I said, I don't know. I was thinking about maybe querying some agents. And she said, that's interesting. And I said, I've been doing pretty well with the first book. So I was thinking maybe I'd self-publish it. Right. And she's like, there is a third option. So she worked with at a firm that also had a literary agent who said, there's this other option, which is Kindle Scout. And so I researched it. I explored it. The thing I love about Amazon is that they know how to tune their algorithm. So they know how to get your book in front of people who love your kind of book. And so I thought, it was kind of a middle ground. And so I threw my hat in the ring, and lo and behold, I won a publishing contract through Kindle Scout, which then my next two books were published through Kindle Press, which is an Amazon imprint. And In the Dark did super well. I was really lucky with that book.
Well, I think perspiration leads to good luck. You worked hard to get there. Inspiration and perspiration combined.
Yeah, and you can't quit, right? You just, things change quickly, and you just kind of do your best to roll with those changes. And so then I wrote a follow-up to the first novel, because that one in my head has always been a trilogy. So I self-published the second one, or the fourth one, because it went with the first one. And then, the fifth and sixth were part of box sets that shipped with other romantic suspense authors or medical suspense. So, so I've taken a kind of circuitous route around everything.
So these box sets involving more than one author, I'm guessing that those were put together by Amazon or by some publishing group?
Some of the, I met, this is, I think, one of the strengths of the indie writing world, which is you get to know other indie authors. And some of those indie authors I met through my Kindle Scout path. And those authors have taken like various offshoots too, right? Some have stayed indie, some have gone on traditional publishing, some have done other things like Kindle Scout or Kindle Press, right, that are smaller kind of digital publishing houses. And so those efforts were spearheaded by some of the other authors that I've worked with. And so we've really cross-pollinated with everybody's audience, which is very powerful.
Word cross-pollination. We're going to take a short break right now. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I really appreciate you, Chris. I think our viewers are as well. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Speak in public? I'd rather be burned at the stake. At least that's how I used to feel, until Toastmasters. I went online and found a club that met every week at lunchtime, and they were close to my office, so it worked out great. I was really scared when I started, but no one pressured me to speak or pushed me to do anything I wasn't ready for. I felt safe, and I realized it was okay to be nervous and to make mistakes, because these people were going to support and encourage me no matter what. And now, well, let's just say things have changed. I speak in front of large groups, lead all-day seminars, and conduct presentations to top executives. Toastmasters changed my life.
There are over 100 Toastmasters clubs meeting all around the Portland, Vancouver area, near your office, home, or even your school. We meet on all days of the week, morning, noon, and night. Our clubs couldn't be more convenient or affordable at under $10 a month. Visit a couple locations and find the one that's just right for you. All the information you need is at Toastmasters.org.
Welcome back to The Right Stuff. Ken Coomes here again. And in this episode, I'm talking with Chris Patchell, award-winning author of suspense thrillers set in the Northwest. And we've had an interesting first half, and now we're going to have a second half of this interview. Chris, again, thank you for being on the show. Certainly enjoying talking with you.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
So you're writing these thrillers, and you're having a lot of success. I have friends that are in the Mystery Writers Guild.
Yeah.
And some of them are at various stages of their writing career, and they're wondering, how do they go from writing something as a labor of love that maybe 6 people read to getting a wider audience, maybe even a best-selling a novel? Any advice for them?
I hate to say this. A lot of it comes down to marketing and luck, right? Luck about hitting the right thing at the right time. And for me, Kindle Scout was the right thing at the right time, which helped it really take off. But also, marketing is not a skill that I naturally have. And so when I finished my first book, and it was up on Amazon, I'd done some good read giveaways or other ways to get it in front of people I didn't know. But I needed somebody to help kind of push me over that edge. And so I was at the Pacific Northwest Writers Conference. And as I was walking down the aisle that has all the booths with for vendors and whatnot, I looked and saw somebody who specialized in indie book marketing. And I'm like, oh, that's what I need. So I met her, and she helped me with my first book that kind of was the beginning of everything. So I do help somebody, always have somebody who helps me with marketing, because I can do my own things, but really I want to focus most of my time on writing and editing and making sure the story is right. Marketing is a whole skill set in its own. So I would say, if you're determined to do it yourself, there are lots of podcasts that you can listen to now that will help you on your way in terms of learning marketing. But then there are also a lot of professionals popping up in different places that will help indie authors market too. So marketing is really huge. You can't undersell that part of the process too, because that's the thing that propels it from being a hobby into being a business.
As you say, though, it is a different skill set. So a talented author may not be a talented marketer.
Right. And sometimes as an author, you're a little too close to your work, right? And when you think about how would I market it myself, it may be different than how somebody else sees it, right? And can find a different angle to get it to the right audience with the right message that you just don't envision because you didn't see the book quite that way.
In addition to that, as you've also mentioned, there's a time involved.
Yes.
The more time you spend marketing or doing anything else other than writing, the less time you have to write.
Yep.
Or rewrite or edit.
And if you think about, I spent a lot of years in technology building teams. And one of the secrets to building a team is figuring out what everybody's skill is and kind of aligning their skill with roles. I have a pretty good business mind, but I don't love marketing. And so it's like, that's not where I'm going to do my best work. It would take me a lot longer to come up to speed and to be able to do it as well, if I could ever do it as well, as somebody who's, more talented and trained in that aspect.
So we're near the end of our segment here, but what I'd like to ask now is whether you have anything else you want to share with our viewers that maybe we haven't touched on or talked about.
I think it goes back to two things. They say write what you know. And like I said, I've never actually killed anybody, and I've never been a police officer, right? So there are a lot of aspects of what I write that I have to do a lot of research in. I would say instead of write what you know, it's write what you love, right? And it's that the things that capture imagination or the things that bring you down rabbit holes that really make you happy or light up your imagination, those are the things that you need to go with, right? Kind of obey your instincts and let that guide you. The other thing is don't quit, right? So it's a tough road, and I think it's really easy to get discouraged and frustrated at different points in your career when you're just starting out and you're learning your craft to you've made some level of success, but you're not quite where you want to get to yet. To you come up with roadblocks, and publishing is always changing too. So just when you think you have things figured out, things switch underneath you, and so you have to stop and kind of take stock and change your tack and whatnot. But I remember there was one particular point in my career, it was very early, it was while I was editing my first book, where I had had some negative feedback, some consistent negative feedback from a group of people that I was with in a writer's group. And it was hard to hear, right? And I thought, I was sitting in a coffee shop one day, and I realized I was avoiding rewriting a certain chapter. And I thought, why are you avoiding it? And I realized that I didn't want to go back and read some of the critique on it. And then I realized, I felt like a failure and I felt like quitting. And I thought, the only way that you actually fail is if you quit. And so I quit the writing group and I kept writing, and it got better. But that's I think one of those things is, sometimes when you come up with those moments, you get passed on by an agent or, something, you get a negative review, because that happens to everybody who has their work out there. Just, feel it, take stock of it, but don't let it stop you. Just figure out a way to regroup and move on.
If people wanted to know more about Chris Patchell and your books, what's the best way to find out?
So there are a couple ways. I have a website. It's chrispatchell.com. You can find me on Facebook. I have an author page, Chris Patchell, on Facebook, and I post a lot of dark, funny stuff. So if dark, funny stuff is your jam, that's where to find me. And I'll also have an Amazon author page, and that's a great place to be able to link to all my work.
Chris, thank you very much. It's been entertaining, informative, and certainly a great pleasure. I'm really glad you made time for this interview.
Thank you for having me, and lovely chatting with you.
All the viewers out there, Chris Patchell, you won't be sorry if you check her out on Amazon or her website or her Facebook page. Read her books. You'll be glad you did. We've enjoyed her show. I hope you've enjoyed the show. And until next time, this is Ken Coomes for The Right Stuff with TV Toastmasters, signing off.
Welcome to an opportunity to take the next step of your professional speaking journey. I want you to be honest with yourself. Have you ever wished you were a star in a television show? Or at an event where the media is interviewing bystanders and you are wanting to be picked to give your opinion of the event? Or even in the smallest sense, you're at a sports game and secretly hope that your smiling face would appear on that big jumbo screen TV? But the jumbo screen always finds the fans with the painted faces. And you think to yourself, maybe next time. Well, what if I can offer you a chance to be on TV? Would you take it? That is what I want to offer you now. I'm Dottie Love, Associate TV Producer and Director. And District 7 is expanding your opportunities to do speaking via television. We have 4 fully equipped television studios and TV Toastmaster broadcasts to over 500,000 homes, plus a YouTube channel. Who knew? We want to invite you to take advantage of using media and television, either in front or behind the scenes. Let me share a few options that you have. First, you can be a guest on a show. Highlight your business or hobby or your community interest. Anything you're passionate about. Be a featured guest. Secondly, you can train to be a host on an ongoing TV segment. We will train you for that. Third, what about creating your own talk show? We will train you for that as well and give you access to a community media studio to do just that. Or lastly, be behind the scenes, either running a camera or editing shows. You decide which avenue is best for you, and our TV Toastmasters team will help you to navigate to get the most out of your media experience. If this intrigues you, please contact us here at TV Toastmasters. I'm Dottie Love, and you can reach me or any of us in the TV Toastmasters family at the contact information at the bottom of the screen. You can also find us on the web. Our website is 7512.toastmastersclub.org.